Before the Sudetenland crisis, the Anschluss with Austria, the invasions of Poland and France, and Operation Barbarossa, there was Hitler's first invasion, the little backyard operation that set the stage for all the Führer's military adventures to come, the operation that showed Hitler what he could actually get away with, and how weak and divided his greatest adversaries appeared to be. The name of this operation, the German army's first under Hitler, was Winter Exercise, but contrary to the innocuous name, it was no exercise. When Germany capitulated in November 1918, after 4 immensely bloody years of war, several things happened. The old ruling order was diminished, the monarchy abolished, and the Emperor, Wilhelm II, fled into exile in the Netherlands, never to return. The German economy became chaotic to match the political situation. German society became polarized between the extreme left, who saw an opportunity to drag Germany down the path of Bolshevism, and the extreme right, made up primarily of angry and disillusioned former servicemen who wanted stability and for Germany to rise again. Germany was made to pay for the war via the punitive Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919. One of the aspects of Versailles was the removal of a strip of German territory west of the Rhine River, which was demilitarized to protect France from any further German aggression. French, British, and American troops occupied the region called the Rhineland. It was just one issue among many that would contribute to the rise in Germany of radical right-wing political parties that culminated in the coming to power of Hitler in January 1933 on a ticket of national rebirth, a strengthening of Germany's position in Europe, and a repudiation of the terms of the hated Versailles Treaty, and latterly of German expansion. In 1925, the then German Weimar Republic had agreed to the Locarno Pact that confirmed that the Rhineland would be permanently demilitarized, basically to assure the French that the Germans could never again use this avenue to attack France. Britain and Italy vaguely supported the French position, believing the demilitarized Rhineland to be the greatest guarantor of peace in Europe. However, in 1929, German Foreign Minister Gustav Stresemann managed to negotiate the withdrawal of the last occupation troops, which were French. As soon as Hitler came to power in 1933, he began investigating the remilitarization of the Rhineland, which was German national territory. War Minister General Werner von Blomberg ordered plans drawn up, but at this stage diplomatic fallout was carefully controlled. The British viewed Hitler with some confusion. London understood that Germany had some legitimate complaints concerning the severe restrictions of the Versailles Treaty, and many thought Hitler would be satisfied by sorting those out, while others feared that Hitler was seeking European domination. Above everything else, Britain and France feared another war. The horrors of World War I had left both nations' politicians with absolutely no appetite for a rematch with the Germans. Britain in particular had reverted to a small professional peacetime army. France was riven by political and economic problems, and had come to rely psychologically upon the Maginot Line, which had been built after World War I as fixed fortifications to prevent the Germans from once more invading them. France in particular worked diplomatically to control Germany through making alliances with other nations, with an intent in keeping Germany under control, notably a diplomatic agreement with the Soviet Union. The key to all of this wrangling was Italy, ironically ruled since 1922 by a fascist dictator, Benito Mussolini. At this time, Mussolini, who was worried about Germany taking over Austria and having Hitler on his doorstep, acted in concert with Britain and France to contain Germany, forming the so-called Stresa Front in 1935, named for the Italian town where the agreement was signed, in return for Italy basically being given a free hand in the Horn of Africa. Mussolini, of course, had great imperial ambitions and saw himself as a direct descendant of the Roman Caesars. Hitler continued, publicly at least, to make peaceful and reasonable statements, especially as he just ordered German rearmament in violation of Versailles and the creation of an air force, the Luftwaffe, both actions of course deeply concerning the British, the French and the Soviet Union. The wheels came off the Stresa front when Italy invaded Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, in October 1935. British public opinion was outraged by the Italian action, including the use of poison gas against tribesmen, and new Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin took a strong line, pressing the League of Nations, a sort of forerunner to the United Nations, to impose sanctions upon Italy. Naturally, Mussolini felt betrayed by his Stresa front allies, Britain and France, and it looked as though war might actually erupt between Britain and Italy over domination of the Mediterranean, which Britain traditionally did dominate through the power of the Royal Navy. But Hitler supported Mussolini's African adventure, drawing Mussolini towards him and fatally weakening the Stresa front. With the Stresa front, the supposedly strong bloc of nations opposing Germany, now in disarray, Hitler seized the opportunity to deal with the question of the Rhineland. He wanted to remilitarize it, to fully make it part of the Greater German Reich, and to wash away the stain of Versailles once and for all. The Rhineland comprised an area of 9,450 square miles that abutted the Netherlands, Belgium, France and Switzerland, encompassing the great city of Cologne and several other major urban centres, and a strip of Germany extending 30 miles west of the Rhine. The last French troops had withdrawn in 1930. Hitler was not stupid. He knew that if he marched into the Rhineland, he could trigger a full-scale war with France, and perhaps also with Britain. But Hitler was also a shrewd gambler. He already knew that Italy would not intervene in the Rhineland, as Mussolini, still smarting from the Abyssinian invasion and the reaction of Britain, had told Hitler that he would ignore the terms of the Locarno Pact. Hitler knew that Britain was very unlikely to intervene alone in a European squabble, and France seemed paralyzed, riven with internal political and economic problems, and with a presidential election in the offing. With these points in mind, Hitler ordered an invasion. It must be remembered that the German military was still quite small in 1936 and completely dwarfed by the might of the French army. Hitler knew that if France sent troops into the Rhineland to contest the remilitarization, the French would probably win, and moreover, Germany had no western defences to stop the French from entering Germany proper. Many senior German army leaders thought Hitler's gamble to be suicidal. Hitler knew that if France attacked, his regime and he himself would be finished. Hitler kept the troop numbers for Operation Winter Exercise deliberately low. A total of 19 infantry battalions and a small number of Luftwaffe aircraft would cross the border into the Rhineland. The Luftwaffe element of the operation consisted of one squadron of Stuka dive bombers and a couple of other units operating outdated biplanes, the Heinkel HE-50 and HE-51. A further 24 anti-aircraft guns were also to be deployed. In addition to this, there would be 13 batteries of artillery, mostly horse-drawn, and no tanks would be deployed. The total German ground force was about 22,000 men. At dawn on the 7th of March 1936, the advance into the Rhineland commenced, and by 11 a.m. the Germans had reached the River Rhine. At this point, a softly approach was planned, and just 3 German infantry battalions actually crossed the river to test the military reaction of France at having German forces on her border for the first time since 1918. Everywhere the Germans advanced, they were met by adoring and welcoming crowds that threw flowers and gave Nazi salutes. German garrisons were quickly established at the main demilitarized cities of Mannheim, Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, Koblenz and Cologne. At the same time as the troops had marched in Berlin the Italian, British and French ambassadors were summoned and handed notes, accusing France of violating the Locarno Pact by signing its own agreement with the Soviet Union. Germany had decided therefore to renounce Locarno and remilitarize the Rhineland forthwith. In Cologne, a parade was hastily organized that saw 800 German troops march past General Gunther von Kluge, commander of the Münster military district abutting the Rhineland. The situation in the far west of the Rhineland was thus. Lining the border on this very sensitive stretch were 3 German infantry battalions. A battalion at Aachen on the border with Belgium, 1 battalion at Trier opposite Luxembourg, and the most provocative 2nd Battalion 38th Infantry Regiment at Saarbrücken on the French border. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights along the border quickly revealed that the French were indeed massing forces on the Franco-German border. General von Blomberg, in overall charge of the operation, begged Hitler to begin withdrawing the army immediately. Initially, Hitler fell under Blomberg's influence and made preparations to evacuate the Rhineland. But then Foreign Minister Constantin von Neurath asked whether any French troops had actually crossed the border. They had not, and von Neurath convinced Blomberg to stay in position until the French actually made their move. The French did nothing, and the German troops stayed put. Hitler had faced down a much more powerful opponent, and won. Hitler looked to his own people a hero who had torn up the hated Treaty of Versailles and restored German territory to the Reich, doing these things in the face of the 2 biggest powers in Europe, France and Britain. 1936 was the point at which Hitler could have been squashed and removed with relative ease by France and Britain, and it was a fatal mistake in not doing so, for his Rhineland success emboldened him to further territorial demands, eventually ending in another world war, the very thing that the British and French had tried so hard to prevent by treating Hitler with kid gloves. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.